What's happening, everyone? Hope you guys are well. Look, just doing a quick little video here on an interesting topic. It's about Josh Curran and his interview on the Bulldogs podcast. And he's got some interesting thoughts about it, and I thought I'd just maybe share what I think. Josh, in the podcast, I don't know if you guys get a chance to look at it, but it talks a lot about his time at the Warriors, specifically the COVID period, the difficulties of traveling, and and then I suppose not getting consistent consistency in terms of being stable. It's really interesting to see how much movement they did during COVID, as a club, and how just all over the place that period was. And again, I give credit to the club for getting through that. But then it talks about the period when Nathan Brown kind of said to him, sort out your defense and then you'll probably be a first grader. And I suppose under Brownie, he did really become a solid first grader. He became a high minutes guy, and we could understand that. I think then what the next thing was is that when things changed under Webby, and that's the part I really want to talk about, working with Webby and what happened there. So I suppose he initially sounded like he wanted to leave the Warriors when Webby came. He's like, it's been 5 coaches since he started. I could understand it. But I think Webby either convinced him to stay or, that he's a part of the plan, and I suppose he thought he was. Now, we all understand what happened in 2023 is that he, I suppose, didn't, maybe what Webby promised him in his eyes. Again, this is just his eyes, isn't what he thought it was going to be. Talked a lot about playing for 20 minutes at the end of a game, sometimes never getting on. Talked a lot about saying, I played more centre than I did back row. And, he's saying pretty much that Webby, his big words was Webby didn't trust him. So, ultimately, I think from his point of view, they had the review at the end of the season. He said that they said they were going to let him speak to other clubs, that they didn't really want to keep him. And then he talked with Gus. Gus got him over there, and when he went back, it was like he said goodbye to the boys, but it sounded like Webby was trying to, I suppose, console him. And Webby he said like Webby was calling him after every second day to make sure everything was okay, or maybe trying to ease it over. But he's like, nah, you didn't trust me. You don't really care about me, or he's pretty much saying, Webby didn't believe in him, so it is what it is. So it goes back to the point, I suppose everyone thought he left because he was homesick. I think there's part of that, but ultimately, from him sharing this, it felt as though he's, just the new coach didn't believe in him, and he just took it that way. He didn't want to play that role. He believed he's a long minutes player. In his eyes, he probably thought, he's better than Marata. He talked a lot about that connection with Sean, and it's true. His connection with Sean, from a back row perspective, was solid. That line he could run with Sean. That was a pretty good back row line in combo with Sean. So, anyway, what I'm trying to get at, what is the information I can gather from that, and what can I understand about the club a bit more? From his perspective, Webby didn't trust him and maybe communicated, tried to get him on board, but didn't show that he matched what he was saying. Sometimes I can feel that about Webby. Maybe we're learning more about him as a coach, that, some things we hear in the media aren't exactly what is happening behind the scenes. I can understand. He's got to manage players. A lot of the stuff is about managing players, communicating to them. But on the other hand, it's part of being a team player that, if you drop down the pecking order, you got to be able to play those 20 minutes. You got to be committed to that. You got to help the team, do that. And I think he did an okay job. Like I'm not saying he didn't, but I understand where he wanted a more of a a full-time role. He wanted to. He thought. I think in his eyes, he felt, I'm better than Marata. Like, I should be the starting back rower. But that where he got knocked off the depth chart. He thought he was probably going to be the starter from what maybe Webby said to him. Yeah, but then that changed. So I just thought it was an interesting thing. The other side of it is like, bro, you're just complaining. You keep repeating the same thing about, like, you know, they didn't trust me, or I was only getting 20 minutes. I was playing more centre. Like, you kept repeating I suppose, the flaw. Maybe he's pointing out the flaw in Webby's bench usage. Maybe he's pointing out the flaw in how he really tried to pick at that Webby only uses 6 players off the bench and leaves the others. Like, he doesn't use his bench fully. And then maybe it is an issue with probably trust. Like, I think he kept mentioning that, but I think it might be clear, and we've seen that as fans, that Webby does have some trust issues, specifically with, you know, like maybe younger players that he doesn't really think highly of. He won't give them massive minutes, and he does push the guys that he likes or he believes in to play longer minutes. My thing is, like, you know, we should be, whoever's on the bench, you should trust them, or you should be using them so that we're not burning out the top players. You know, we shouldn't be burning out the AFBs to play 70 minutes, Tohu to play 70 minutes. We should be using those guys sparingly, or balancing it out. So that goes back to maybe Webby's, like, actual bench usage. Something to, you know, so it just his I suppose his view of the club and his experience with of Webby, and his view is different to, I suppose, what we view of him as a coach, as a manager. And me personally, I'm still backing Webby. It's just good to get a little insight to what it's like for players that are on the outer, or players that maybe Webby doesn't believe or trust in, and how they kind of view their experience with him. Now, it's hard. Like, you know, he comes into clubs, he needs to change that culture. He needs to get his guys on board. So for me, probably he's looking at it like Josh Curran's. And just his view, he doesn't trust him, doesn't, you know, value his game, which, you know, is arguable. I'd probably say that Josh, like, that connection with Sean was really solid. Not to say Josh was the perfect player. I mean, he had his flaws as well, but you could probably argue that he's better than Marata. You could. But at the same time, you could argue maybe Marata has some better areas, based on 2023 at least, that Josh is lacking in. But you could probably say, let's just say for argument's sake, that he is better than Marata. And Webby didn't trust him. I suppose that comes back to, like, a management thing too. Like, you know, you pay $800K for Marata, you can't sit him on the bench. So even though Marata wasn't even really Webby's signing, it was probably, I think, more Nathan Brown's or whatever. I think from a club's perspective, even the likes of RTS, you got to play the guys that you're paying the money to, and try and figure out the way to work. And that's where I suppose even the likes of RTS coming in, trying to fit him in, when reality is, like, maybe some other guys just deserve a starting job over him, and maybe RTS just needs to go to Cup and, you know, become in that way. So it's people management, you know, is probably the hardest thing to do in as a coach. I mean, technically, yes, you got to install all your systems and your defensive systems, your attacking structure, but managing people, I imagine, is just so difficult. And from what the sounds of Josh's experience is, like, you know, just to deal with Josh Curran would be a headache in a way, you know, like, but, you know, Webby, those are the things that he's got to learn to manage. And then the other argument is he's just a sook. Maybe that's why Jazz went at him, and, you know, maybe that's why, you know, there's a little bit of bad blood. But, you know, I saw him, he was at SJ's, you know, farewell at Shark Park. I'm sure, you know, the guys do like him. But some of it was just like bad blood, bad taste in the mouth. And, you know, you'll always have your point of view, but there's always two sides to a story. Let's not get it right. But I just thought it was interesting to see what he said. And he's probably been the only player since leaving to really come out with a bad thing to say about Webby. Remember the comments he said, I know, Serraldo was a defensive mastermind. Webby just he's pretty much alluding to saying that Serraldo is a better coach than Webby. He came out with those comments. So what I'm trying to say is, it gives you a little insight, but at the same time, it's okay to question what he's saying. But there's also some elements where you're thinking, oh, actually, what he's saying is kind of relatable to what I'm hearing about other people, like RTS, AFB, or, just other guys that are probably leaving. What is it that we need? Like, what is it about Webby that he's doing good, and maybe what is it about he's doing bad? I ultimately think Webby's doing really good stuff. I think he's a good people manager. I mean, Sean backs him. There's people that have been around a lot of coaches, and they understand what Webby's trying to do. This is just part of the business, that you cannot keep every player. And not every player is going to fit that style of what he likes. For example, maybe Curran was just, a smaller, leaner back rower, and he liked the bigger body of a Marata for defensive purposes. I have no idea, but coaches have their ones they like and the ones they don't. What I would say is that moving forward, that the club need to, I suppose, work with the coach and getting the right profile of what he needs. I think we're doing that through development. I think the guys that are coming up will experience it. But once everyone starts getting it, there's always going to be a player short. There's always going to be a player, that you're going to have to get rid of. And you do have to sell them a dream, sometimes, because you need that depth, If you didn't have a Josh Curran last year, you probably don't make the finals, Maybe you're in the 6th or 7th. Like, having a Josh Curran was such a nice luxury to have. You could bring him on, that he could play centre. So sometimes you are, I suppose, selling it a bit to try and keep guys on when they're not going to be starters, but they're going to be depth guys for you. You know what I mean? So it's just a tricky business, but I thought it was an interesting podcast. But anyway, go have a little listen, see what you think. See how you interpreted it, and chuck it in the comments below. Maybe I'm way off, maybe I'm bang on, I don't know, but I just think there's a lot to just listen to. Even, negative comments. I suppose what Josh said was negative about Webby. Let's just call that what it is. And I'm not believing all of it, I'm not saying it, but there's something to learn from it, that we can better understand how the club's operating, how Webby operates, and maybe that we can learn as fans to how our coach views things, how our coach operates, and how we can kind of view where the club's going and that type of thing. But anyway, let me know what you guys think. Like, share, and subscribe. Take care. Have a good day.